The day I almost lost my family's land was the day I discovered I owned the entire valley. At 7 a.m., police sirens cut through the pine-covered ridge. Mist clung to the treetops, and smoke from my chimney mixed with diesel exhaust. My illegal cabin, as Cheryl Langford called it, stood against the rising sun. She thought I was just some squatter, a stubborn old fool clinging to rotten logs. What she didn't know was that I didn't just own the land under my boots. I owned her mortgage, her husband's business lease, and the road she drove in on. This wasn't just a property dispute. It was a war. And Cheryl had no idea she'd picked a fight with the man who controlled her entire neighborhood's survival. Cheryl Langford arrived in Crystal Pines like a queen claiming a kingdom. She bought the largest house, dyed her poodle pink, and marched into the HOA election like she'd been waiting her whole life for a crown. She promised beautification, modernization, and community standards. The old-timers knew better, but most of the residents were newcomers, families chasing mountain air, retirees chasing quiet sunsets. They voted her in, not realizing they'd handed the keys of their neighborhood to a woman who believed clipboards carried the power of law. At first, her rules hit the cul-de-sacs, trash can placement, mailbox heights, lawn color codes. Then her eyes crept uphill to my cabin. Noise complaints when I was dead asleep, bright orange structure violations taped to my window, letters demanding retroactive architectural review for a cabin built in 1957, back when only loggers and elk roamed this ridge. The final straw came in the form of a fine, $900 due by the end of the month for unauthorized occupancy. That was when I knew this wasn't ignorance, it was a campaign, and Cheryl wanted me gone. What she didn't understand was that this valley wasn't just my home, it carried my family's name. My grandfather cut the first road through these hills. He built this cabin by hand with my father, using timber they felled themselves. Back then, there was no Crystal Pines, no resort board, no manicured cul-de-sacs, just ridge, rock, and creek. When developers arrived in the late 70s, they carved subdivisions into parcels, but they didn't buy the valley, they leased it. My grandfather signed the trust agreement with two conditions carved in stone. The family cabin remained untouchable. Any attempt to restrict or evict a legacy occupant would void discounts and easements granted to the HOA. For decades, no one tested those conditions, until Cheryl. That morning, I was stacking firewood when the sheriff's cruiser rolled up. He didn't even get out, just cracked the window inside. She called it in as a Code 43 unauthorized dwelling in HOA territory. You know anything about that? Behind him, Cheryl stood at the gravel's edge, arms crossed, smug grin plastered on her face, her little clipboard hugged like a badge. "Sheriff," I said, "want to see something interesting?" I disappeared into the shed and came back with the binder, thick leather, worn edges, every page of the land trust carefully protected in plastic sleeves. I flipped to page 1. The sheriff stepped out this time, not because Cheryl ordered him to, but because he saw weight in that binder. He read in silence while I split wood like it was any other Saturday morning. Cheryl, misunderstanding his focus for obedience, stomped closer. "This man is squatting," she snapped. "There's no power, no clumbing. He's cooking over an open fire. This isn't 1840. This is Crystal Pines." The sheriff held up a hand. "Cheryl, this cabin sits on 146 acres of deeded land. It predates Crystal Pines by 67 years. He owns not just this parcel, but the access road and," he flipped the page, "the private water rights feeding the valley." Her smugness cracked. For the first time, she blinked. But Cheryl didn't retreat, not yet. By afternoon, a man in a tailored jacket knocked on my door, clipboard in hand, polite smile painted on. "Mr. Martin?" he said. "I represent Crystal Pines Development. We'd love to discuss rights of way, particularly concerning emergency access and utility lines." They were panicking already. By Monday, Cheryl's tune had changed. Apology emails flooded my inbox. Misunderstanding, overstep. We value our neighbors. But I knew better. Queens don't apologize, they regroup. The first sign of her retreat came in silence. The maintenance crew stopped showing up. Trash cans overflowed. The sprinkler system sputtered. I hadn't done much. Just one call to the water rights office. A quick inquiry about Crystal Pines' easement fees. Turns out they hadn't paid in 3 years. The review triggered an automatic hold on their water usage. Browned lawns, coughed taps. I watched from my porch as Cheryl stood in her bathrobe, screaming at a landscaper. He just shrugged and pointed to the dry grass. I poured another cup of coffee. My grandfather was a clever man. In the binder, I found 2 fail-safes. Any HOA attempt to fine or evict the cabin would void their road access discounts. Any violation of water rights would trigger immediate county review. Within a week, Crystal Pines received formal notice. Their entire development's permits were under review. Emails flew. HOA meetings stretched late into the night. But up here, it was quiet. Cheryl tried charm. One evening, she knocked with a pie in hand. Knocked 3 times, loud but polite. I didn't answer. She left it on a stump. I tossed it untouched. Never trust a pie from a queen at war. The next week, she tried tears. Showed up in a puffy vest, no clipboard this time. "I didn't know who you were," she whispered. "I was just trying to follow protocol." I stepped outside, kept my voice steady. "You called the cops. You taped threats to my door. You never asked, you assumed." Her lips trembled. "Please, don't ruin us." I shook my head. "I don't need to. You already did that." By April, Crystal Pines was collapsing under its own arrogance. Construction halted on 2 new model homes. Short-term rentals lost bookings as water pressure dwindled. The resort board, furious, called me in for talks. They wanted stability. I offered vision. A sustainable eco-retreat, 10 cabins max, blending into the hillside, powered by the natural aquifer. Investors leaned in. Cheryl, meanwhile, leaned out. Her emails grew frantic. Her husband called me privately, offering to sell their house off-market. Said they were moving closer to family. I didn't ask where. I just reminded him, 1 missed lease payment and you're trespassing. Today, the valley is quiet. No sirens, no fake violations, just wind through the pines and smoke curling from my chimney. The HOA still exists on paper, but its queen is gone. Its rules are whispers. Its power, broken. All because one woman forgot the most important rule my grandfather left in his handwritten note at the back of the binder. Only enforce if they forget who owns the valley. And Cheryl forgot.